I'm a 28-year-old woman, and I've always thought of my family as close-knit, maybe even more than most. I've got parents who've been together for decades and a younger brother, who I grew up with as my best friend. Being that close to them, it never crossed my mind that planning my wedding with my fiancé would go the way it did. When I got engaged to my boyfriend of 5 years, my family was just as excited as I was. My fiancé and I wanted a small, intimate ceremony, just close family and a handful of friends, nothing big. We both liked the idea of a wedding that felt more personal and less of a grand event. My mom, though, had other ideas. From the moment we started discussing the wedding, she was completely involved, almost as if it was her wedding to plan, not mine. I figured it was just her way of showing support. After all, she'd always been very involved in my life events, and while she could be a bit overbearing, I never saw it as a problem. Early on, she suggested that we have a family-only rehearsal dinner. It'll make things more special, she said. Since my fiancé and I were already planning a small wedding, I thought a close family rehearsal could be nice. I agreed, not seeing the full picture. I chalked it up to my mom wanting to keep things intimate. But things started shifting. Out of nowhere, Mom brought up adding some of her friends to the wedding guest list. I didn't even know half of these people, but she kept saying they were practically family and had seen me grow up. I was a bit uncomfortable since it was supposed to be a small gathering, but she pressed on, listing reasons why each of them should be there. To her, they were part of the family circle, but I barely remembered some of these people. When I tried to bring up the budget, things got even stranger. Originally, my fiancé and I had set a budget that we felt comfortable with, but my mom kept suggesting adjustments. She'd find ways to squeeze in extras she wanted, like a specific florist or a pricier catering service. It became less about what we wanted and more about what she envisioned. The budget I'd set up was slowly expanding, with her justifying it as a once-in-a-lifetime event. Then the topic of family traditions started coming up, almost daily. My fiancé and I aren't exactly traditional, so we planned the ceremony to reflect our style. But my mom kept pushing for certain rituals, most of which didn't resonate with either of us. It's just how we've always done it, she'd say, implying that not including these traditions would be disrespectful. I started to feel like the wedding was morphing into something I hardly recognized. The pressure only grew when she brought up a new venue she'd found. We'd already settled on a charming little spot, simple and perfect for us, but my mom was insistent about this other place. It was larger, grander, and felt more like something for a big, extravagant event. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, she said again, as if that alone made it worth abandoning everything we'd planned. I didn't want to upset her, so I reluctantly agreed, feeling cornered. When it came to choosing bridesmaids, things got awkward with my friends too. My mom started questioning my choices, suggesting her own picks based on who she thought would look best in photos or who was closest to the family. She wanted to swap out my friends for distant relatives or family friends she liked better. It wasn't just about appearances either. She genuinely seemed to want her circle involved in every aspect, pushing my friends to the sidelines. Then came the invitations. I had my own idea of what they should look like and wanted to handle the guest list with my fiancé. But my mom insisted on taking over the invitations, saying she'd make sure everyone felt welcomed. I was uncomfortable with the idea, but again, I let her handle it, thinking it would make things easier. In hindsight, this was a mistake. At the family-only rehearsal dinner, things went downhill quickly. I was already a bit on edge with all the changes, but I figured a nice evening with my family would help ease the tension. Instead, my mom pulled me aside and went down a list of everything she thought needed fixing. My dress, the seating arrangement, the vows. She had something to say about each detail. I could feel my patience wearing thin, and yet, I didn't know how to push back. The next blow came when I overheard her talking about a surprise dress she'd arranged for me on the day of the wedding. It was one she'd picked herself, different from the one I'd chosen months ago. I couldn't believe she'd go that far. My fiancé, who was starting to pick up on my stress, tried to step in, suggesting we set some boundaries with my mom. But every time I tried to talk to her about it, she'd brush it off, saying she was just trying to make sure everything went smoothly. At my own bridal shower, the situation escalated again. It felt more like a party for my mom than a celebration for me. She'd taken over the decorations, invited her friends over mine, and had even chosen a theme I'd never agreed to. I was there as a guest, not as the bride-to-be. By the end of it, I felt completely sidelined, like I was watching someone else's party. Then the final blow hit. My mom called me and calmly explained that she'd restructured the ceremony. According to her, she had decided it was best to keep it as a family-only event, which meant I wouldn't actually be attending my own wedding. Her reasoning was that it would make everything simpler and more meaningful. I sat there in stunned silence, realizing my own family had effectively disinvited me from the wedding I'd been dreaming of. Nothing prepared me for the betrayal I felt in that moment. Update 1. The moment I heard my mom say I was disinvited from my own wedding, I sat there in shock, struggling to make sense of it. The phone call had been calm, almost casual, like she was just going over some last-minute details. But the words kept echoing in my mind. She'd restructured the ceremony into a family-only event, deciding it was better this way. I could barely breathe. This was my wedding. How could my family make such a decision without me? I called my parents back the next day, thinking there had to be a misunderstanding. But when I got them on the phone, they both seemed completely unfazed. My mom went on about how she was doing this for the family's sake, saying it was a tough decision but the right one. She insisted this was best for everyone involved, that they were looking out for me, for us. It was as if the wedding was suddenly their project, not the day my fiancé and I had been planning together for months. Then, my younger brother chimed in. We'd been close all our lives, so I thought he'd back me up. But to my shock, he agreed with my parents, He told me they were only trying to save me from myself, as if I'd somehow lost control over my own wedding. He said they just wanted what was best for me, and that I needed to trust them. It didn't make sense. This was the same brother who'd always joked about how ridiculous family drama could get. Now, here he was, fully on their side. My fiancé, who had heard everything, was as shocked as I was. He tried to be supportive, but he suggested I consider where my family was coming from. Maybe they felt overwhelmed, maybe it was a mistake. But none of it added up, and I couldn't ignore the pit in my stomach. After all, he knew how much this day meant to me, to us. That evening, I decided to have a heart-to-heart with my mom. I needed to understand why she would take control like this. But when I tried to bring it up, she dismissed my concerns as if they were nothing. She told me I was being selfish and short-sighted, that I was overreacting and should just appreciate what she'd done. It was like she didn't even see me as her daughter anymore, more like a guest in her own event. Desperate, I reached out to my extended family, hoping someone would listen, but every call went the same way. Each aunt and uncle I spoke to had already heard my mom's version of events, and they were all on her side. She'd framed the wedding as this intimate family celebration and had somehow convinced them that I was completely on board. I felt like a stranger in my own family, my own story twisted into something unrecognizable. Then came the social media posts. My mom started posting about the wedding as if it was already set in stone. She'd share pictures of wedding planning and talk about how close family was coming together for a beautiful, intimate celebration. She made it sound like I was thrilled about it, like I was part of this decision. Friends started messaging me, congratulating me on the intimate family gathering, and I was too embarrassed to tell them the truth. It was unreal. Seeing all this, my fiancé stepped in again. He suggested maybe we should consider a quick courthouse wedding, just the two of us. He figured it would spare us more family drama and let us at least enjoy the day without the stress. I knew he was right, but the thought of going through with it without my family hurt. I'd always pictured them there, celebrating with us. Just when I thought I couldn't feel any worse, my brother reached out again. This time he didn't hold back. He told me straight up that they thought I was too immature to plan a wedding, and that my mom was only helping me by stepping in. He said I should be grateful for her guidance, and that they were actually saving me from embarrassing myself. Hearing this from him broke something in me. I started to spiral. I kept wondering if I'd somehow caused this, if maybe they were right, and I'd just been blind to it. My best friend noticed something was wrong and urged me to talk to someone. She said my family's behavior was controlling, that this wasn't normal, and encouraged me to take back control. With her push, I decided to start seeing a therapist. I needed someone to help me make sense of what was happening, to figure out how to set boundaries. Around this time, my mom started sending a flood of messages. Each text was more guilt-inducing than the last. She said I was abandoning the family, that I'd ruined everything. She painted herself as the victim, claiming she'd only tried to do what was best. Each message felt like a punch, making me question myself even more. My fiancé's family, on the other hand, was amazing. They saw what was happening and immediately offered their support. They suggested we hold a small, private ceremony with them instead. The idea felt comforting, and they promised they'd make it special no matter what. Finally, I realized I had a choice. I didn't have to let my family control this day. I could reclaim it for myself and my fiancé, for the life we wanted to build together. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of clarity. This was our wedding, and I didn't need anyone's permission to make it ours. With my fiancé and his family by my side, I decided to move forward. I was done being sidelined in my own life. Update 2. With my fiancé's family offering their full support, we began quietly planning our own wedding, a private ceremony that truly felt like ours. We kept it under wraps from my family, knowing the reaction would be explosive if they found out. This time it would be intimate, just a small gathering with close friends and his family. The thought of it made me feel a bit lighter, like I was finally reclaiming something that had slipped away. First, we needed a venue. We went looking for something simple but meaningful, a place that would reflect our personalities, not just a fancy backdrop for photos. We found a charming little spot outside of town, a small garden with a beautiful gazebo surrounded by wildflowers. It was peaceful, understated, and perfect for the kind of ceremony we wanted, intimate and real. We booked it without hesitation, both of us feeling like we'd found a hidden gem. Next came the dress. After everything with my mom, I knew I couldn't wear the dress she'd insisted on. I wanted something that felt like me, not like her idea of a bride. I found a dress at a local boutique, simple, elegant, and completely my style. When I put it on, I felt a surge of independence, as if I was finally stepping out of the mold my family had tried to fit me into. I bought it that day, no second guessing. Even as we moved forward, I couldn't fully shake the guilt. Part of me felt like I was betraying my family by planning this wedding without them. I decided to reach out to my mom one last time, hoping we could talk things through, but that conversation went nowhere. She accused me of turning my back on the family, making it clear that she didn't see my side of things at all. I hung up, feeling more certain that this was the right path, even if it hurt. With my mom's reaction in mind, we kept our guest list small. I invited my best friends, the same ones who'd been pushed aside by my mom's bridesmaid suggestions. They were thrilled to be included, and they stepped up in ways I hadn't expected. They offered to help with everything, from decorations to arranging a small potluck for after the ceremony. Seeing their enthusiasm reminded me of what true support looked like, and it made me even more grateful for their friendship. My fiancé's family was equally amazing. His parents offered to handle anything we needed, no questions asked. His sister volunteered to help with flowers, and his dad even offered to make a speech. They'd always treated me like family, but this took it to another level. I never expected to feel so accepted, and it was comforting to have people genuinely excited for us, without any hidden agendas. But somehow my family found out. I'm still not sure how, but one day I got a call from my dad, demanding an explanation. He was furious, saying I was excluding them from my life, and that this new wedding was an insult to the family. I could hear my mom in the background, fuming, saying they'd been disrespected. It didn't matter to them that they'd left me out of my own wedding plans. They were fixated on being in control. Then came the ultimatum from my brother. He called separately, saying that if I went through with this new wedding, he'd cut me off for good. He called it selfish, saying I'd ruined everything, that I was making a mockery of our family's traditions. It was heartbreaking to hear him talk like that, especially since we'd been so close growing up. But he seemed resolute, leaving me with a choice: go along with my parents' version of the wedding, or lose him forever. I was torn. Family loyalty had always been a part of my identity, and for so long I'd put their needs and expectations before my own. But as I reflected on it, I realized that following their wishes had cost me more than I could have imagined. I knew if I backed down now, I'd be right back under their control, unable to make choices for myself. I couldn't let that happen. In therapy, I brought up these feelings, and my therapist helped me understand the roots of my guilt. She pointed out how much I'd sacrificed to keep the peace with my family, how I'd prioritized their happiness over my own, time and time again. She encouraged me to focus on what made me happy, reminding me that family loyalty didn't mean letting myself be controlled. Determined to follow through, my fiancé and I finalized every detail, from the music to the decorations. It felt surreal to plan something that wasn't filtered through my family's preferences, but it also felt incredibly freeing. We decided to temporarily block their numbers to avoid any last-minute drama. For once, we could focus on what truly mattered, celebrating our love and the start of our lives together. When the big day arrived, it was everything we'd hoped for. The garden was quiet, with soft sunlight filtering through the trees, and our friends and his family filled the space with laughter and warmth. My best friend stood by my side, and my fiancé's dad gave the most heartfelt speech, welcoming me into their family. The whole day felt like a breath of fresh air, free from the pressure and tension that had weighed on me for so long. Standing there, surrounded by people who truly cared for us, I realized just how right this decision had been. This wedding was ours, not anyone else's. It might not have been the grand celebration my family wanted, but it was real, filled with love and authenticity. And in that moment, I finally felt at peace, ready to move forward into this new chapter with the people who genuinely supported us. Update 3. After our wedding, I started posting a few photos to share with close friends. Nothing fancy, just a couple of shots of us in the garden, laughing, surrounded by the small group who had been there to celebrate. I wanted to remember this moment, to mark it as a new beginning. What I didn't expect was that these simple photos would trigger a full-on family meltdown. It didn't take long for the calls and messages to start flooding in. At first, it was just a few notifications. My parents were furious and didn't hold back. I opened one message after another, each one worse than the last. They called me selfish, ungrateful, and accused me of abandoning the family. My mom wrote long paragraphs about how I'd betrayed them by excluding them from the most important day. She insisted I'd embarrass them and questioned what people would think. There was nothing positive, just guilt and shame, over and over. Then my brother got involved. His messages hit even harder. He told me I'd chosen strangers over family and that he'd never forgive me for this humiliation. He made it clear that, to him, I'd abandoned him, and he didn't see a way back from this. Each message felt like a punch, more personal and hurtful than the last. He brought up memories from years back, using them as proof of how I'd apparently always been selfish, always on my own path. It was overwhelming. I needed space to think, to process everything. I decided to cut off communication, just for a while, to get my head clear. I blocked their numbers temporarily, hoping to get some distance from the constant flood of guilt. For the first time, I realized just how deep these dynamics ran. It wasn't just the wedding. It was as if every decision I'd ever made was under a microscope. With some space, I started seeing things I hadn't noticed before. Looking back, I could see how much control my family had exerted, not just in this wedding but in past events too. Every major decision in my life had come with advice that quickly turned into pressure. My therapist helped me piece it together. She explained that in families like mine, people play specific roles, and stepping out of those roles can feel like a betrayal to others. She showed me how my family expected me to be the dutiful daughter, the one who never challenged them. This wedding had broken that unspoken rule, and now they were reacting as if I'd turned my back on them. Meanwhile, my fiancé stood by me, reminding me why we'd made this decision in the first place. He encouraged me to focus on the future we were building, to think about our life together, and not get pulled back into the guilt trap. His family also rallied around us. They offered their support, and it felt good to be surrounded by people who genuinely cared without any strings attached. They treated me like I was one of them, and it was comforting, like I'd finally found a place to belong. But the fallout didn't stop there. My mom, apparently frustrated with being unable to reach me, took to social media. She started posting vague, passive-aggressive comments, painting me as the ungrateful daughter who had abandoned her family. Her posts were just ambiguous enough to avoid direct accusations, but anyone reading between the lines could tell who they were aimed at. She mentioned how some people had no respect for family values, how certain choices had left her heartbroken. Friends of hers began commenting, sending her sympathy, expressing their shock at my behavior. My friends noticed. Some of them started messaging me, confused by what they were seeing. When I explained the situation, they were supportive and couldn't believe the lengths my family was going to. A few even left comments on my mom's posts, defending me and subtly pointing out the other side of the story. It wasn't an all-out confrontation, but it was enough to let my mom know that people weren't buying into her narrative completely. One day, I got a private message from one of my aunts. She'd seen the drama unfolding and wanted to reach out quietly. She told me she understood, that she'd seen this kind of thing before. She didn't say much more, but she hinted that my mom's behavior wasn't new and that I wasn't alone in dealing with it. I didn't know how much to trust her, but I was grateful to know there were people who saw the bigger picture, even if they couldn't say it openly. As the weeks passed, I began feeling a sense of independence I'd never had before. All of this, the messages, the family meltdown, the social media posts, had brought my fiancé and me even closer. Without my family's influence hanging over every decision, I felt freer, like I could finally live on my own terms. For the first time, I wasn't making choices to please anyone but myself and my husband. It was liberating. After talking it through with my therapist and my fiancé made a final decision. I decided to go no contact with my family, at least for the time being. It was painful, but I knew it was necessary for my own mental health. I couldn't keep allowing them to pull me back into a cycle of guilt and control. In the quiet that followed, I found peace. It was bittersweet, knowing things might never go back to how they were, but I could finally see a future where I wasn't bound by anyone else's expectations. Now, I could focus on building a family, a life that was truly my own, surrounded by people who respected me for who I was. Update 4. As time went on, I began hearing more about what my family had been saying about me. A mutual friend reached out, hesitant but concerned, and let me know that my mom had been spreading stories about my betrayal to anyone who would listen. She painted me as ungrateful, rebellious, even cruel. According to her, I'd abandoned my family in the most selfish way, leaving them blindsided and humiliated. She didn't mention her role in the whole thing, of course, to anyone hearing it. I was the bad daughter who'd cut off her own family for no reason. My husband's family saw the posts and heard some of the gossip too. Instead of pulling back though, they stood by me, reminding me I'd done the right thing by setting boundaries. His mom even reached out to tell me how proud she was of me for standing up for myself. The support from them made all the difference. They'd become the family I'd never realized I needed. Then, out of nowhere, my brother reached out. He sent a short message apologizing for how he'd treated me. He admitted that he'd felt pressured by our parents to stay in line, and that he was wrong to side with them. Part of me was relieved. I'd missed him, and his words felt like a small crack in the wall that had gone up between us. But I couldn't shake the memory of his harsh words during the wedding chaos, and I wasn't sure I could trust him fully. It was hard to know if he meant it, or if he'd come around because he saw the damage their actions had caused. In therapy, I had a breakthrough that helped me put things into perspective. For so long, I'd prioritized my family's needs over my own, always bending to make sure they were comfortable. But now I realized that my guilt was rooted in years of being conditioned to put myself last. It was freeing to understand this. With my therapist's support, I finally started letting go of that guilt, recognizing my right to choose my happiness, even if it didn't align with their expectations. Not long after, my mom reached out, her tone entirely different from before. She claimed she never meant any harm and that this was all just a misunderstanding. She urged me to come back to the family, to move forward and let the past go. It sounded like she wanted to brush it all under the rug without acknowledging the hurt she'd caused. But instead of anger, I felt a sense of clarity. I knew I needed closure, and for that, I needed a real conversation with them, not another act in their performance of family unity. After talking it over with my therapist and husband, I decided to meet with my family one last time. I wanted a clear ending, whether or not they acknowledged their actions. My husband offered to come with me for support, but I felt this was something I needed to face alone. I set up a time, and as the day approached, I focused on staying calm, reminding myself this meeting was for me, not them. The gathering was tense from the start. My parents acted as if nothing serious had happened, greeting me with forced smiles and trying to make small talk. My mom even brought up some old family memories, almost like she was trying to reset everything. But I wasn't there to pretend. When I brought up how much their actions had hurt me, my mom brushed it off, saying they'd been just trying to help. She deflected every point I raised, insisting their intentions had been pure. It was as if acknowledging any fault was out of the question. I stood my ground, explaining how deeply their manipulation and control had affected me, especially during what should have been one of the happiest times of my life. I told them how I'd felt excluded, how I'd been left out of my own wedding. My mom grew emotional, insisting she'd only wanted the best for me and couldn't understand why I saw her as the villain. To her, it was all a big misunderstanding, something I'd blown out of proportion. My dad, as usual, stayed mostly silent, shifting uncomfortably in his chair. He muttered something about wanting peace in the family, but it was clear he'd never really been involved in any of this. Seeing him sit there, saying so little, made me realize he'd always been a bystander, letting my mom dictate everything without stepping in to help me. Then, to my surprise, my brother spoke up. He admitted he'd seen our parents' behavior as controlling, that he'd noticed it long before the wedding. He explained that he'd felt trapped, pressured to go along with them because he didn't want to lose their approval. Hearing this from him was unexpected. For the first time, I felt like he was genuinely on my side, acknowledging the damage they'd done. It softened something in me, and I realized he'd been just as caught up in their expectations as I had been. By the end of the conversation, it was clear my parents would never truly understand. They were stuck in their version of the story, convinced they'd done nothing wrong. I realized then that I couldn't change them or make them see things from my perspective. But that was okay. I didn't need their understanding to move forward. As I left, I felt a strange sense of peace. I knew they might never fully grasp the harm they'd caused, and that was something I'd have to accept. But this meeting had given me the closure I needed. I could finally step back, knowing I'd done everything I could to be heard. Leaving that day, I felt lighter, free from the weight of their expectations. For the first time, I felt ready to focus on my own happiness, without guilt. And I knew that, moving forward, I could make choices based on what was best for me, not what kept everyone else happy. Update 5. After the last meeting with my parents, I made a decision to go low contact. I still cared about them, but I knew I needed some distance to protect myself. No more daily check-ins or constant updates. This time, it was on my terms. I'd respond occasionally, keep things light, but I'd no longer share personal details or look to them for support. My brother started reaching out more, and I could tell he genuinely wanted to repair our relationship. His messages were consistent, and he kept things simple, just checking in, sharing small things from his life. There was a shift in him, a softness that wasn't there before. He even admitted he'd started seeing a therapist, inspired by what I'd done. Slowly, we began to rebuild, step by step, with none of the old expectations or guilt hanging over us. Meanwhile, my husband's family became my safe haven. They'd always treated me kindly, but after the wedding, they seemed to open their arms even wider. My mother-in-law called to invite us over for every holiday, and she made sure I felt included in everything. They celebrated me in ways that my own family never had, without strings attached. It was like finally experiencing what unconditional family support looked like. Surprisingly, a few extended family members from my side reached out quietly. An aunt who'd stayed silent during the wedding mess called to check on me, saying she understood why I'd made my choices. Another cousin sent a message, mentioning that they'd noticed my mom's controlling tendencies over the years, but hadn't felt it was their place to intervene. These small acts of support felt like little wins, reminders that I wasn't the villain in everyone's eyes. During this time, I started reconnecting with friends I'd neglected through all the family chaos. My best friends welcomed me back without missing a beat, ready to support me through this new chapter. We planned regular get-togethers, took small trips, and even started a weekly coffee date tradition. They'd seen everything I'd been through, yet never judged or pressured me to act in a certain way. Having friends like them made me realize just how much I'd missed, and just how much I'd sacrificed for the sake of family approval. With a new sense of freedom, my husband and I finally went on our long-delayed honeymoon. We'd put it off to deal with the drama, but now it felt like the perfect time. We chose a quiet, scenic spot and spent a week away from everything. No phones, no messages, just us. It was like hitting the reset button, giving us space to decompress and reconnect. Every day felt like a reminder that this was the life we'd built together, free from outside influence. But even as I moved on, I couldn't fully escape the family rumors. Friends occasionally mentioned that my mom was still talking about me, making subtle comments here and there. She hadn't let go of the narrative she'd built about me abandoning the family. But hearing it didn't sting like it used to. I no longer felt the need to explain myself or justify my actions. Therapy had helped me understand that seeking approval from people who couldn't support me was a losing game. I deserved love without conditions, and I was learning to let go of the need to keep everyone happy. As I adjusted to this new life, I began to build a circle of people who respected me for who I was. Between my in-laws, friends, and the few supportive family members, I created my own chosen family. They were people who lifted me up, celebrated my choices, and respected my boundaries. It felt like a fresh start, like I was finally creating a community based on mutual respect instead of obligation. With no one's expectations holding me back, I began exploring hobbies and goals I'd set aside for years. I took up painting again, something I hadn't done since college, and even joined a book club. For the first time, I felt free to explore who I was outside of my family's influence. Each new discovery added a layer to my life that felt deeply satisfying and fulfilling. My brother and I continued to talk regularly, and I noticed him growing in his own way. Therapy seemed to be helping him work through issues that went beyond our family drama. He was learning to stand up for himself, even with our parents, and it was encouraging to see him break out of the mold they'd put him in. We talked about our childhood, shared memories, and gradually rebuilt our bond on a healthier foundation. Eventually, I decided to have one last conversation with my parents. It was more for me than for them, a chance to set clear boundaries and let them know where I stood. I explained that while I still cared for them, I wouldn't tolerate any more attempts to control my life. I needed respect for my choices, or there would be no relationship at all. Predictably, they didn't fully understand, and my mom tried to make it about how much I'd hurt her. But this time, I didn't engage. I was calm, clear, and didn't feel the need to defend myself. I left knowing that whatever happened next was up to them. As I walked away from that conversation, I felt a bittersweet sense of acceptance. They might never change, and I had to make peace with that. But that realization came with relief, too. I no longer needed their approval to feel whole. I was ready to live life authentically, focusing on what made me and my husband happy. Now, as I look to the future, I feel hopeful. My husband and I are building a life we're both proud of, and we talk openly about the kind of family we want to create, one rooted in love, respect, and genuine support. If we have children someday, they'll know they're loved for exactly who they are, with no strings attached. Looking back, I see how far I've come, and I'm grateful for the journey. This experience taught me that family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who stand by you without conditions, who support you as you are. And as I move forward, I'm determined to fill my life with that kind of love, the kind that truly lasts.